Dakota moved through the apartment, like a storm contained in human form. Today was her 36th birthday, but it did not feel like a celebration. She had deadlines looming at work, a client presentation to finish before midnight, and a growing knot in her stomach as she tried to balance party preparations with emotional exhaustion. To make matters worse, her mother-in-law, Veronique, had planted herself in the kitchen since dawn, barking criticisms like a general at war. "Dakota, did you even taste this sauce? You always oversalt everything. Honestly, how did my son end up with someone who can't even cook properly?" Veronique muttered, hovering over every pot as if her life depended on it. Dakota clenched her jaw, holding back a sharp response. The catering was already ordered from a top-tier restaurant, but that did not matter to Veronique. She only wanted control. In the living room, her husband Julian was glued to the couch, remote in hand, watching some mindless documentary about lost civilizations. "Julian, could you help me set the table, or at least take the wine out of the fridge?" Dakota asked, trying to keep her voice level. "Babe, you know I do not do domestic. I'm a creative type. I need to preserve my energy," he replied without even turning his head. A laugh almost escaped her dry, bitter disbelieving. Julian had not held a job in 2 years since his failed tech startup, which had left her cleaning up the financial wreckage. Dakota paid every bill, every grocery, even helped cover a loan Julian took out in his sister's name. And now here she was, working herself to the bone, to make this day look perfect, while the people closest to her chipped away at her soul. She looked in the mirror and saw the truth. She was not tired from the work, she was tired of being invisible. The birthday cake could wait. Today, something inside her cracked, and that small fracture was the beginning of something much bigger. As Dakota stood near the kitchen doorway, watching Veronique rearrange the cutlery for the third time with an expression of supreme dissatisfaction, a quiet fire began to stir inside her. The apartment inherited from her late grandfather, a quiet, wise man who always told her, "Never give your peace away," felt less like a sanctuary and more like a stage for a play she no longer wanted to star in. Julian, as expected, remained parked on the couch, playing the tortured genius role he had self-assigned years ago, while his mother controlled the kitchen like a war zone commander. The tension in the room was suffocating, but Dakota moved forward, meticulously, checking each table setting, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because this party wasn't just a birthday, it was a mask. A perfectly constructed facade to cover the emotional exhaustion that had become her norm. When the first guests arrived, smiles were pasted on, laughter rehearsed. Her colleagues from the PR firm chatted brightly about campaigns, and clients, unaware of the storm beneath Dakota's composed surface. Her friends who had seen her fade over the past year offered hugs laced with concern. Her parents arrived last, her mother whispering, "You look pale, darling," as she handed Dakota a bouquet of lilies. But even amidst the decorations and cheerful chatter, Julian contributed nothing except his presence and a bouquet of corner store roses. When he whispered, "Happy birthday, babe," and kissed her cheek with absent affection, Dakota felt her skin crawl. Right here, if you can feel Dakota's pain, comment "yes" and hit the subscribe button to follow the rest of this unbelievable story. As the night wore on, Dakota's mind drifted. She no longer felt like she belonged in her own home. She had sacrificed everything, time, money, love, just to be criticized and ignored. But something had shifted. The strength that sparked earlier now fanned into resolve. This party wasn't just the last act. It was the turning point. She looked at her guests, smiling, sipping wine, and began to wonder what would happen if she stopped pretending, if she stopped saving everyone else and started saving herself. Her heart raced, because deep down, she already knew the answer. And soon, so would everyone else. Just as Dakota tried to steady herself with a sip of lukewarm champagne, Julian abruptly stood up, knocking his chair back, with a screech that pierced through the music and conversation. The room fell into a stunned silence. Guests froze mid-toast forks, hovered in the air, and all eyes turned to him. The blood drained from Dakota's face, but her spine straightened instinctively. "I can't do this anymore." Julian slurred, his voice thick with cheap vodka and pent-up resentment. Dakota, you are not a wife. You are a bossy, cold, work-obsessed robot. I'm filing for divorce. Starting tonight. His words exploded like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her mother's hand trembled, clutching a napkin like it was a lifeline. Her father looked ready to stand, but stayed rooted, watching Dakota's reaction. Friends exchanged wide-eyed glances. But Dakota, she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't ask him to reconsider or plead for dignity. Instead, she gently set her glass down and turned to face him fully, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "Well, Julienne," she said, her tone steady, "you just gave me the best birthday gift I could have asked for." That one sentence shifted the air. From the kitchen doorway, Veronique's face turned ashen, but Dakota ignored her completely. She moved across the room with purpose heels tapping like a countdown to the final scene of a long brewing tragedy. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. For those of you wondering, she began voice projecting. So even the neighbors might hear this apartment. Our home was never ours. It was mine, inherited from my grandfather. Months ago, I transferred the deed to my parents. Julian has no claim to it. And as for the finances, every bill, every grocery, run every family loan mine. I supported Julian, his mother, and his unemployed sister while he found his creative spark on the couch. Her words hung heavy in the air. Some guests tried to mask their shock. Others just gaped. Julian's face contorted confusion, giving way to panic. He hadn't expected a counterattack. Certainly not one so elegant, so lethal. But Dakota wasn't finished. "I'm done carrying dead weight. I'm not ashamed. I'm done sacrificing my peace." She turned back to the crowd. "Now shall we toast to freedom?" And in that moment, everyone knew she had just taken her power back. As Julian stood frozen, his ego unraveling in front of the guests, Dakota didn't pause. She turned from him like brushing off dust and walked with deliberate calm to the table where her parents stood. "You were right," she whispered to her father, who nodded quietly, pride flickering behind his glasses. The silence that hung in the room after her declaration was thick, some guests uncomfortable, others admiring, but all watching her every move. Julian, still stunned by the mention of the property transfer, finally sputtered, "You tricked me! You planned this!" His voice cracked. Dakota raised an eyebrow. "No, Julian. I protected myself. Something you should have done too if you had spent less time making excuses and more time being a partner." He looked around seeking an ally, but even Veronique had disappeared, likely out of shame or calculation. And that only made it worse for him. What followed was nothing short of poetic justice. As Dakota detailed the countless sacrifices she had made, paying his debts, covering his mother's medical bills, supporting his sister's failed online business guests, who once pitied Julian, now turned their sympathy to her. "While I built presentations, you built castles in the sky." She continued, not with spite, but with clarity. "While I worked late nights, you chased ideas you never committed to. You were not a visionary. You were a burden." Murmurs of agreement echoed around the room. Friends who had once bitten their tongues finally saw the truth laid bare. Even colleagues who had never met Julian looked at him now with a mixture of disdain and disbelief. Dakota let her words land not like daggers, but as reality checks sharp enough to pierce but not cruel. That was never her way. If you've ever found yourself giving everything to someone who only takes comment yes and subscribe to this channel, Dakota's story might feel painfully familiar to many, but her courage can light the way. Julian slumped back into his seat, defeated, as Dakota lifted her glass. "To truth," she said, "the kind that frees you, even if it burns first." This was not revenge. It was revelation. And for Dakota, it was the first time in years she felt the room wasn't pressing down on her, but rising with her. As the final echoes of Dakota's toast faded, the energy in the room shifted entirely. What had started as a celebration marked by tension and quiet dread transformed into a gathering of solidarity. Her parents, once worried about their daughter's silence, now beamed with quiet pride. Her colleagues, friends, and even distant relatives leaned in, drawn to the strength she had just displayed. Laughter returned to the air, But it was freer now, no longer forced under the weight of secrets. Julian, unable to comprehend his complete loss of control, backed away into the corner like a discarded shadow. The man who had once played the charming dreamer now looked like a bitter actor whose final scene had ended in a boo. But Dakota did not look at him again. Her focus was on the faces that mattered. Camille, her longtime friend, pulled her into a hug, tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." Dakota nodded. "I had no choice," she said softly. "Sometimes the only way out is through the fire." The guests clinked their glasses and rallied around her. The air buzzed, not with tension, but with celebration, a true rebirth. Her boss from marketing leaned over and said, "Whatever you need, Dakota, I've got your back. You have a future brighter than you think." The warm glow of support washed over her. And just then, the front door slammed. Julian's mother, Margot, stormed into the room. Her voice sliced through the joy like a blade. "You humiliated my son. You call this justice? You'll regret this, girl." Dakota stood firm. "Margot, I regret staying silent for so long. If you came to insult me, I suggest you leave before you embarrass yourself further." Gasps rippled through the guests, but Margot said nothing. She glared, then turned and exited, dragging her stunned son behind her. The door clicked shut. A beat passed. Then applause. Louder this time. And Dakota. She did not cry. She laughed. A real full laugh, the kind she had forgotten she could make. Tonight she did not just claim her freedom. She earned the right to never apologize for it again. This was not the end of her story. It was her true beginning. That night, when the last guest had left and the apartment had fallen into a strange, peaceful silence, Dakota stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant promises. The apartment no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a chapter closed. Her champagne glass still half full, she sipped slowly, letting the cool air brush her skin. She felt everything and nothing at once, exhaustion, triumph, and an overwhelming stillness she had never known. She had not just spoken her truth. She had burned the bridge behind her and stepped into unknown territory. In the stillness, memories crept in late nights, working while Julian snored on the couch, the cold silence after each argument, the way Margot rearranged her kitchen without asking. All the years she had handed over piece by piece until there was almost nothing left of her. But tonight, she had gathered those fragments and built something powerful herself. The next morning, sunlight poured into the apartment like a blessing. Dakota brewed her coffee and took a deep breath. It smelled like freedom. The to-do list was long legal paperwork, financial accounts, packing away the last remnants of Julian's presence. But for once, she was not overwhelmed. She was in control. Then the doorbell rang. When she opened it, she was met not with flowers or apologies, but with Margot, arms crossed, face hard. "I came to talk," she barked. "You ruined everything. Julian is depressed. You've broken him." Dakota didn't flinch. Julian was already broken. He just expected me to keep gluing him back together. Margot scoffed. "You think you're better than us now?" No, Dakota said softly. "I just think I finally remembered who I am." Margot's mouth opened, but no words came. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. She turned and left without another word. As the door shut, Dakota stood taller. She had faced them all, Julian his venom, Margot her judgment, and not once had she crumbled. That morning she stepped into her day not as someone's wife or someone's disappointment, but as a woman who had reclaimed her story. Because freedom does not come wrapped in peace, it is won in battle. And Dakota. She had already won. After the door slammed behind Margot, the apartment was filled with a silence so rich, so complete, it almost sounded like music. Dakota stood still, her hand resting on the frame, her breath steady. She felt a peace she had not tasted in years. For the first time, her space was truly her own. No snide remarks, no sideways glances, no belittling disguised as concern. She walked through the apartment, slowly touching the objects that had once made her feel small, now reclaiming them like battle trophies. Every pillow, every mug, every picture frame felt lighter, freer. She brewed a second cup of coffee, not out of habit, but because she wanted to. As she sipped, her phone buzzed with messages from friends and coworkers. "Proud of you. You're amazing. We're here." The support warmed her more than the coffee ever could. She opened her laptop and began making a new list of goals, of dreams, of places she wanted to see. Not once did she think of Julian. He had become just another closed chapter in a novel that now belonged solely to her. Outside, the sun climbed higher, as if rising just for her. Inside, Dakota was not just surviving, she was beginning again. Stronger, louder, unapologetically herself. There was no grand finale, no perfect bow tying her story together. But maybe that was the point. The beauty of her freedom was not in its neatness, but in its truth. Because sometimes the greatest love story is the one where you finally fall in love with yourself. If this story resonated with you, drop a yes in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more empowering stories like Dakota's. Your voice matters. Let's rewrite our narratives together. Oh,